Good evening, everybody, or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're from. If you're on the West Coast, you're just now hitting midnight. If you're in Hawaii, you're reaching about 10 o'clock. Um, Let me just get some things set up real quick, and we'll talk some sports with you here real quick. All right. We're going to run down the day's scores, highlights, and notable stories. We've got a lot to cover. We've got the ALCS underway, the NLCS. We're also going to get into the NFL, as well as the NBA Finals, of course, because that just wrapped up tonight as well. We're going to get started here with talking about the NFL, and I think the biggest story that we've got today came out of Atlanta. Dan Quinn, no longer the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and by that same token, Thomas Dimitroff is no longer your general manager. So a lot of changes coming for Atlanta. So the first thing that we want to talk about is where do they want to go from here in terms of finding a new head coach? Who do we want to find in the interim? Like I said in my video I just posted not too long ago, I think Lincoln Riley would be a great candidate because Oklahoma not going anywhere this year, got knocked out of the top 25, could be sneaking back in here pretty shortly with their victory over Texas this past Saturday. But I really think that if Atlanta's going to act, they need to act now. Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. Just to get a program, get a system installed going into next year, so that way they're not having to start from scratch at the beginning of next year. They want to get something set in stone now, because when it comes down to it, Matt Ryan only has a couple years left in this league, I believe, especially in Atlanta. Julio Jones has turned that corner as well. He's already 30 years old. His hamstrings are starting to give out on him, and I think Calvin Ridley's already passed him as the number one wide receiver. So we really need to get a coach that was like Dan Quinn, really defensive-minded. Unfortunately for Quinn, 2017 happened, Super Bowl 51. A loss like that can really change the culture of a team. And unfortunately for Dan Quinn, I think we could have had a dynasty. Unfortunately, we don't. Seems like we're back to 2015 where we don't have a defense and still a pretty good offense. So I'm okay with that. So being an Atlanta fan, you're kind of used to the tragedies and whatnot. So we will continue on with the other big story in the NFL. Of course, with this Seattle and Minnesota game, you had Dalvin Cook go down with a groin injury. He's going to have an MRI set for Monday. But the biggest injury that we had was Dak Prescott going down with a compound fracture of his right ankle. And you really hate to see that happen to anybody. But with Dak Prescott, he had a lot going for him this year. With the recent loss of his brother, that added motivation. But at the same time, I was critical of him and his ability to pass the ball beyond 20 yards. And go figure, he turned me into a fool this year, especially playing against him in fantasy. Man, he was set up for an MVP type season. So just to see that happen to him, it was just a horrible thing. I mean, it brings to mind that even a couple of years ago with what happened to Alex Smith. Great to see him back on the field again today. But Dak, wishing you a speedy recovery and come back soon so you can mount another 20-point comeback against my Falcons. Well, maybe not be as difficult this time since we no longer have a head coach. But I don't know how many of y'all play fantasy football, but there seems to have been a major issue this morning. It actually started yesterday morning. There was a data outage for one of the major statistics programs. I run through a site called RT Sports, but also FanDuel has been experiencing multiple problems. At the same time, a few other sites like Google, Yahoo was having issues at the same time. And it was just funny reading the comments from FanDuel thinking that it's fixed. It's a conspiracy. The fix is in. They're just taking our money. Oh no, this is way bigger than FanDuel. This outage apparently happened yesterday morning, Saturday morning, during the college football games. So it's really taken a big hit on fantasies, fantasy sports, college football and NFL football mainly. Scores are still not up. FanDuel is still down. Some other sites are using outside companies to get the statistics filtered into them so they can still keep running. But when it comes down to our scores for the day, let me get this up here. We'll give you a quick rundown. Obviously, y'all know what happened with Dan Quinn. And so tomorrow night, Monday Night Football, we've got the Chargers in New Orleans. We'll go over that later. So we're also talking about, with Dan Quinn already gone, the next hot seat pretty much belongs in New York with Adam Gase. New York Jets are already 0-5. Cardinals beat them today 30-10. Kyler Murray almost on 400 yards, touchdown and a pick. Joe Flacco really wasn't that impressive. Remember, he got that big contract after the Super Bowl victory, even though the defense was the one who kind of carried him to the championships, kind of like the Eli Manning syndrome. You're pretty good, but let's be real, it was your defense that kind of got you through. Joe Flacco, 195 yards, 1 touchdown. And, like I thought, Le'Veon Bell, after leaving Pittsburgh, was going to be a flop. 13 carries, 60 yards, adding on a catch for 7 yards. He just, well, look at that. So, yeah, it's all about the program that you're in. It's kind of like what I was saying about Antonio Brown as well. It's not about just the player. It's about the system that you're in. In Pittsburgh, they put some points on the board today. We had a 4-touchdown game from a wide receiver. My goodness. It's not often you get to see that, as Pittsburgh takes care of Philadelphia 38-29. And that man I'm talking about, of course, is Chase Claypool. He had 110 yards on 7 catches, 3 scores, and another one on the ground. Chicago over Tampa Bay 2019. Tom Brady forgets what down he was on. Anything else of note? Baltimore over Cincinnati 27-3. Defense showed up big time, sacking Burrow 7 times, including a forced fumble, which led to a defensive touchdown. Lamar Jackson really hasn't been that impressive this year. He's been okay, but he hasn't been like he was the previous 2 seasons. Not really the MVP type that we've been used to. Houston, after firing Bill O'Brien, gets their first win, 30-14. Gardner Minshew, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, still wasn't enough, as Deshaun Watson had his nice little coming out party, 359 yards and 2 scores. But the surprise of the day, the Las Vegas Raiders, 40-32 over the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, great day, but I think the Raiders kind of listened to Derek Carr last week after saying that he was getting sick and tired of losing, pulling the big upset in the divisional rivalry. Rams over the Washington Football Club, 30-10. Jared Goff, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Kyle Allen really didn't do much this game, which brought on the big story of the game. Was 2 years after Alex Smith suffered that gruesome injury, like Joe Theismann. He 17 surgeries later, he's back on the field, and that, just like they were talking about on Fox Sports this afternoon, it takes a lot of guts to get back out there and face your fears in that kind of a situation. So we moved to the game that got Dan Quinn fired. Actually, it just wasn't just one game. It was, it was a long time coming. 23-16 Carolina Panthers. You really can't blame the defense on this one. Matt Ryan drove the ball down the field on the game-tying drive, only to throw the ball right into the gut of a safety of the Carolina Panthers. Pretty much ends the game. They go downfield, kick the field goal. Forget about it. 23-16, the final there. Another big upset, Miami 43-17 over San Francisco. Garoppolo was benched, but of course he hasn't been playing for the last couple weeks, so you can't really, be too hard on him. Beathard didn't really do much better, throwing 94 yards at a touchdown. But the legend of Ryan Fitzpatrick continues, 350 yards and 3 scores. Cleveland over Indianapolis. I had Cleveland's defense. I picked them up this week to play them against my opponent, but I don't even know how much they scored because my statistics are down. Phillip Rivers kind of crashed and burned, 243 yards, but 2 picks. Quarterback rating of 42.1. That's not going to get the job done. But Baker Mayfield, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 picks. And for anybody counting at home, Odell Beckham Jr. had a better quarterback rating than Baker Mayfield. It's kind of funny. Cowboys over the Giants, 37-34. All to me is not lost for the Dallas Cowboys. I think Andy Dalton's still a good replacement, a good quarterback. Of course, not going to be like Dak Prescott, but I think now the Cowboys are going to be relying more on Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe that'll open up the passing lanes more for CeeDee Lamb, who's pretty much looks like he's going to be staying for a little while in Dallas. 124 yards and on 8 receptions, and Michael Gallup. So it looks like Dallas finally has a new core of receivers that are got to solidify their offense for a couple of years to come, especially with Amari Cooper only getting 23 yards. It's nice to have that kind of depth. Seattle over Minnesota, pretty much last second, 27-26. Russell Wilson throwing the touchdown pass to DK Metcalf with a few seconds to go. But I think the big story here is going to be how long Dalvin Cook's going to be out. But it seems like they're not going to miss much. Alexander Mattison came in and rushed for an extra 112 yards afterwards, so it seems like they're going to be fine there. And Madison's a pretty good pass catcher out of the backfield, so I don't think there's going to be a problem there. But that's pretty much a good rundown of the NFL scores from around the league. I'm sorry if I didn't get to any comments. I just want to make sure. I kind of got 2 computers going at the same time, just kind of running this is kind of the inaugural video, so feel free if you have any comments, if you have any if you're a fan of any team, we'll be glad to talk about them. But I have a good idea. Let's go to the NBA Finals, shall we? So LeBron, AD, and the LA Lakers win their 17th championship by beating the Miami Heat 106-93. There's going to be a lot of debate going forward on whether who should have been the MVP, whether it was LeBron just because of his name, or whether it was AD because many people really do believe that he outplayed LeBron in this series. But really, it doesn't matter. I don't think any of these guys are going to care. So I want to get to another story regarding the NBA Finals. Let me bring up this quote. When LeBron James was talking about, let me see here. It was on CBS Sports when LeBron James, after the game, when receiving his MVP award, he says, "I want my damn respect too." And that kind of strikes me as a little bit selfish to me, because when we think of LeBron James, of course, he's an absolutely great player. He's an outstanding player. But you have to think about 2011 when he was mocking Dirk Nowitzki in the playoffs. When that finals ended, all the Miami Heat players stayed out to congratulate the Dallas players, shook everybody's hands except for LeBron James, who made a mad dash towards the locker room. And as we know in recent memory, just the other day with a few seconds left on the clock, he didn't wait for his team. He just walked off the court. So he's not the same person in victory as he is in defeat. So for him to ask for that amount of respect, to me, kind of, it just shows me a little bit of selfishness on his part. I know he's a good guy. I respect him for the work he's done in the inner cities and things like this. But at the same time, as a player, I can't really give him that much respect when he does those things in defeat, and he's not as gracious of a loser as he is that great of a winner. So really, it was never about the comparison to Jordan or anything like that, because we know these two guys played in different eras. So I'll never get into that debate about Jordan versus LeBron. Would LeBron survive in Jordan's era where they pretty much punched you in the mouth and the referees would kind of look the other way? I don't think so. Would Jordan survive in this era? Probably not as well. So with LeBron James, the only thing I can say is kind of get back on that even keel, man. Be just as great with your losses as you are with your victories, and you'd be that much more of a respectable guy, and you wouldn't have to ask for respect. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents on it. Great season for the Miami Heat. Nobody thought they would be here. Kind of like with the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the cup. The COVID issue kind of altered history a little bit when it came to sports, because when you think about how long these teams are out, the momentum was turned off for everybody. And you had teams that were hotter than the Lightning. You had teams that were hotter than the Heat, ironic to say. But it really does show that when it comes down to it in the playoffs, it's always the hotter team that wins and not the best team that wins. So the Eastern Conference probably would have looked a lot different. I can't say the same for the West, as LA was pretty much the dominant team throughout the entire season. So I think without the COVID thing, we may have seen a team like Milwaukee in there, but you never know. That's basically left up for debate, and that's it. And so with that, we segue over to baseball now, with the ALCS now in full swing. I've taken a lot of heat for picking against Houston, especially when it came to the wild card round and how Carlos Correa was talking after that victory against Minnesota. Now, I took issue with Carlos Correa talking about, all the haters and things of that nature. What are they going to say about us now? And I was like, well, your offense kind of sucks. Because even though you did beat Minnesota 2-0, you only batted 194 in that series. Well, lo and behold, their bats wake up in the Oakland series, and they just tear the ball up. And so, I took my licks for it, but then again, at the same time, how many people out there picked, Houston to beat Oakland in the series? Not many. And when I think about the Houston Astros, I think about Barry Bonds at the same time. You respect them for being good, but you kind of know everything that went on. So we're not hating them for what they did after the fact. We're hating them for what they did then, using that advantage to get ahead. Barry Bonds with the steroids use, and now the Astros with the trash can. For Carlos Correa to speak up like that and say, we're the haters going to think of us now, it doesn't erase what happened in the past. I mean, it's great that you guys are here in the ALCS now, but it still won't. Even if you win the World Series, it's not going to cover up what happened in 2017. And I think that's what the Astros need to figure out. But if they win the World Series, great. I mean, great for them. I mean, they will feel vindication of sorts. But against the Tampa Bay Rays with the pitching staff that they have, I don't see that happening. With Snell and Glasnow leading the charge, oh my goodness. And that bullpen lights out. 2-1 the final in game 1. 3 solo homers. Altuve goes deep for Houston, but that's all the offense that they get. And I picked against Houston in the Oakland series. I'll pick against them in the Tampa series. But I think this Tampa team is a little bit deeper pitching-wise than Oakland was. So I think Houston's going to have a little bit of a bigger problem, especially if Greinke still has that sore arm and isn't as effective. because they've already lost Verlander and Cole left to go to the Astros. So this is not the same pitching staff as we saw in years past that helped carry the team. When it comes down to the NLCS, I think this is going to be the most exciting series. When we look at these two teams, Atlanta and LA, we have very big similarities. And again, this is you can't really use the hottest team in baseball versus the best team, because both these teams are pretty hot right now. They're both 5-0 in the postseason. I think LA has technically won 9 games in a row if you date it back to the regular season, and they have Walker Buehler going to Game 1 against Max Fried, and Kershaw in Game 2 going against Ian Anderson for Atlanta. And for me, the key for Atlanta in this series is that I always believed that the Dodgers were a better hitting team against right-handed pitching. So you've got the 3 starters, you've got Fried, you've got Anderson, and then you've got Kyle Wright. So you've got 2 righties and a lefty, and I think you need that extra lefty to kind of pair up in Game 4 just in case. And when you go off a track record, I think Sean Newcomb would be a good choice in Game 4 if they add him to the postseason roster here for the LCS. If you remember a couple of years ago, he almost no-hit the Dodgers, and he's had some good success against them in the past. So I think, with the bats like Muncy and Bellinger, you're going to need somebody like Newcomb to come in and kind of, quell them a little bit. I think Game 1 is going to be a good one. I think Max Fried is going to be a little bit more in his game than he was in the Miami series. Now, when it comes to the Dodgers' decision to pitch Buehler or Kershaw in Game 1, I kind of disagreed. I thought Kershaw would have been a better matchup, as Atlanta has had experience against Buehler in the NLDS a couple of years ago and ended up beating him. You remember the Acuna Grand Slam that was off of Buehler. So we've had history of touching up Buehler. We've got a better offense this time around than in 2018. So I think if Atlanta's going to get off on the right foot, I think this is the perfect opportunity for them to do so. By no means do I think that if they win Game 1, they win the series, because it's going to be a long series. This is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. These teams are just too good to have this thing end in a sweep or a 4-1 series. The bullpens are both top notch. Atlanta adding so many pieces in the offseason, because we know that was their biggest, bugaboo in 2018. You turn it over to the bullpen and you knew the game was over, but now you feel like if you get it to the 7th inning with a lead, you've got a chance. So that's the one thing Atlanta's been missing. With the Dodgers, their average bullpen speed is about 94 miles an hour. I think that's tops in the majors. Even though Jansen has not been on his game recently, everybody else has kind of picked up the slack for him. So both bullpens are very formidable. So I'm pretty much thinking that this is going to be a 7-inning race to see who can get to their pen with the lead. So in this series, I know I'm a Braves fan. I'm kind of representing right now, but I do think that the Dodgers ultimately have the upper hand, even though this is going to be close. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes all 7 games. But with the experience of Kershaw, with the power of Buehler, I think we're overlooking Dustin May, who would be a very great Game 4 starter for them. This dude can put it up there about 100 miles an hour, and he's got breaking stuff that is absolutely filthy. So this isn't the Dustin May that we saw a couple years ago when the Braves faced him. And you can't forget Urias, who came in a big role in Game 3 against the Padres as well. So he's going to be a tough lefty to face. And so I think the one big advantage is that LA's starting staff is deeper. So both lineups are pretty much similar. Bullpens are similar, but it's that starting pitching where LA goes deeper that gives them the upper hand in this series. And so with that, I think we've covered most of the sports material for the day. It only took me less than half an hour. I think that's a pretty good achievement. If there's anything that y'all want me to talk about, I'll be more than happy to do that, as long as I'm knowledgeable in that information. The sports that I really don't follow, I don't really follow tennis that much unless Novak Djokovic is hitting the line judge with the tennis ball. golf. I like to play golf, but I'm really not much of a follower of the sport. I mean, I know some of the names, but outside of that, and NASCAR too. I used to work for NASCAR, but that's pretty much about as far as I got. I worked for them, but I never really followed them. But yeah, if we don't have any comments, I do believe we've got ourselves a successful program here tonight. We're just going to wait for a few more. If you had any comments or questions, I'll wait for just a couple more minutes and then we'll sign off. But in the meantime, we're going to be, let's look through more sports scores here just to see if we got everything. So of course it was ankle fracture and a dislocation. It was a compound fracture. Not quite the injury that Joe Theismann suffered. Let's see. No, I think my comments page is busted. Hang on, let me check this out. There we go. Okay, Brian, I got you. With Quinn and Patricia, it's odd to see the trend of ballyhooed assistants who ultimately fail as head coach. Yeah, you're right. Because you remember when Quinn came over from Atlanta in 2015, it was like, you know, this was our savior. This was the man who was going to resurrect our defense. This was going to be the guy who shows us what defense is all about. And with the offense that we have, nobody can stop us. And he could never get over that loss in Super Bowl 51. Also, fantasy football is a storm this week with games being postponed. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think the Denver and New England game, you know, I had Julian Edelman going. I had to replace him with Golden Tate. Yeah, that worked out really well. But it kind of works out for next week because Edelman gets to be back in the lineup, which would have been his bye week. But COVID is just, it is messing some things up this year, especially with the Titans as well. I had Derrick Henry on one of my lineups, and yeah, that team's gone from 2-0 to 2-2 real fast. But it's going to be interesting to see going forward how they're going to alter these precautions because apparently they're not working. I mean, how many games have we had, you know, to be postponed? I mean, the Titans have been in the center of it now. New England's got positive tests. So, you know, it's going to keep happening throughout the year, and it's just going to be interesting to see how they play it. I don't think they're going to go as bad as moving it into a bubble like the NFL, like the NBA and Major League Baseball. Technically, they're kind of half in, half out playoff bubble, I guess. Greg Gumbel had Murray playing for Baltimore. So why do the Tigers have Alex Cora and AJ Hinch on their potentials list? For me, you know, I know AJ Hinch wasn't involved. I know Alex Cora had a bigger hand in it than AJ Hinch did, but AJ Hinch knew about it and pretty much did nothing to stop it. So if you know, to me, if you know about it, you're just as bad as the people who participated in it. When it comes down to Cora should have just been banned permanently because it seems like him and Beltran were the masterminds behind that whole thing. Hinch, man, I'm telling you what. I mean, they got off easy. They really did get off easy, and then I think the players kind of used that to, you know, kind of start boasting themselves. You see, nothing really happened, blah, 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 blah. And talking about the hater speech from Carlos Correa, that really got under my skin as well. Oh, yeah. I mean, it definitely falls on management. I think this was a special situation where everybody involved should have had the hammer thrown down on them. I believe the players got off scot-free. I mean, you remember the 1919 White Sox scandal. Basically, you had 8 guys tossed out. And if I believe right, the commissioner at the time was a former judge. basically threw 8 guys out for throwing a World Series game. 100 years later, we have guys who get away scot-free for cheating and basically stealing a World Series. I do believe that if they didn't, commit those acts, I think the Dodgers had them that year. And funny enough, one of my old fall ball buddies was playing for the Dodgers that year, and he kind of gave it up in Game 3. He came in the 11th inning, and I think he gave up a homer to Springer no, he gave a back-to-back shots. I think it was Springer and Altuve. Judge Kennesaw Mountain, that's the man right there. So it just kind of shows you how much we've regressed in the last 100 years when it comes to that. It's just, when you look at the comparison, it's just absolutely crazy. So who knew? You can, oh yeah, the players absolutely run the sport. Back then, you get banned for handing them a World Series, and then now they look the other way when you steal one. I mean, and what really sucks about it is that I've been a big fan of Brian McCann the entire time, and with the rumors that I heard about him, it was kind of disheartening. So I think he kind of retired at the right time. I think that had a little bit to do with it as well, but I think just the fact that he was getting older as well. I was actually standing right next to Chip Caray when they announced his retirement, because I was at the last game when St. Louis blew him out 13-1. I mean, you talk about a mass exodus in the second inning. I was the only person left in my row by the end of the second. But yeah, let's see what other storylines we got. See, what was weird, I didn't see your comments at first because I have the big screen right here, but I also have this screen right here that also shows comments, but nothing ever popped up. So yeah, it's good that you let me know that, because I never would have seen that. Let's go look at some other sports stories here. I know I've missed some sports stories, but let's see. So the Seahawks are now 5-0. Kansas City is now dropped to 4-1. Let's see. So you pretty much have Buffalo, Pittsburgh, the Titans at 3-0, and Green Bay, the only undefeated teams that are left. And the Dallas Cowboys sit atop the NFC East at 2-3. So here's a good question: how far is Andy Dalton going to take the Dallas Cowboys this year? I mean, this is basically his team for the rest of the season, because we know Dak's not coming back. I mean, personally, I liked him in Cincinnati. I mean, he and AJ Green had a good rapport, and I think he can build that with a CeeDee Lamb, definitely with Amari Cooper. And I think now they have the added motivation to kind of win it for Dak, because you kind of look back on the offseason Dak had, losing his brother, and at the same time talking about suicide awareness and opening himself up about that topic. And so you can tell it was a little bit of a real offseason for him. So it was actually good to see him, take that extra step. And I think the real tragedy of it all, and I know Jerry Jones isn't going to mind, was that Dak never got his contract. He started playing like, oh yeah, Dalton definitely got a raw deal in Cincinnati. I think Dalton's best years are going to be here with Dallas as opposed to Cincinnati, because the culture in Cincinnati. If you make the playoffs, you're going to lose in the wild card round. Otherwise, you're basically in the basement of the AFC North rather. But I think Dalton's set up for success if they can fix that defense. I think he's going to have a decent year. If you're a fantasy player, I suggest picking him up as a backup and seeing what happens. But yeah, I was hard on poor Dak. I mean, I knew he came a long way. And like I said, he finally earned the right to ask for that contract, and then this happens. That's just irony there for you. But hopefully he gets better real soon and comes back better than ever and earns that. I mean, I think he's already earned it, but now with the broken ankle, he's not gonna. Yeah. And of course, they're talking about the LA Lakers parade. You know, I can't be totally mad about the Lakers because I'm, gotta be happy for AD, Anthony Davis's first title. He wasn't going anywhere in New Orleans, so it was kind of like a saving grace. Romeo Crennel, yeah, he did exactly what Bill O'Brien could not do, and that was win a football game in 2020. I think we should keep him on as head coach for the end of the rest of the season. At 73, and you kind of think about how demanding the head coaching job is in the NFL, how much time you have to put in, and at 73 or 3 years old, how stressful is that going to be on you? So, obviously you can't go long term with Romeo, but there's some good candidates out there. All right, Brian, I got to ask you as well, what about the vacancy for the Atlanta Falcons? Who are we thinking? I mean, I've already stated my guy and the reasons why. I mean, I just think it's a better fit. The timing, works out just well with Lincoln Riley. He may not be a Nick Saban where he'll, excel in college ranks and then go to Miami and just stink up the joint. Maybe he does have the mold of an NFL head coach. You never know until you try. I mean, you can't fall out of last place. I mean, we're already 0-5. So, Rich McKay is going to be taking over, the GM duties. So he's got, double duty going on right now as president and GM. But I never really touched on who they can find long term as a GM, though. Wow. Romeo Crennel, 28-54 as a head coach and 3-1 as an interim. We'll just plaster him with the interim title for the next 2 years until he decides he wants to retire. Just pretend your job's not safe and he'll be all right. But I think really it was more of the DeAndre Hopkins trade than it was anything else. I got Bill O'Brien fired because he was the GM too. So that was just one of the dumbest trades I've ever heard. I mean, yeah, David Johnson isn't quite done yet, but DeAndre Hopkins had the broader future. And to let a guy like that go was just incredibly insane. I know DeAndre Hopkins and, Deshaun Watson didn't like that very much. Which brings me to, real quick. Let's see. But yeah, fun fact. Let's see, for Atlanta, what about Jim Caldwell? Yeah. I know Caldwell had some time in Detroit. Didn't really have much to work with, so it would be nice to see a veteran coach like that come in to see how we could work Matt Ryan in this offensive scheme. And really, the most important thing is, if he can fix that defense for us. No injuries are a big issue right now because we can't stay healthy. But I'm pretty sure he can, make sure that his guys can fall on an onside kick and not let it roll 10 yards before making an attempt on it. That's kind of like my joke because one of the Atlanta safeties, I believe, was on the COVID list. And it said he caught COVID. I said, well, the good news is if you can kick the ball on the ground 10 yards, no Falcon will catch it. I don't know why my mind thinks of stuff like that. Yeah, 9-7 in Detroit is actually really good. So I don't know what ownership was talking about being not good enough. I mean, I'll take 9-7 right now. I mean, I would be happy with 9-7 because that's still a wild card spot. You would have to think, especially in the NFC with the Eastern Division. There may not be a team that finishes above 500. I mean, same can go for the NFC West too, because the San Francisco 49ers are kind of, taking it downhill. And I think Seattle's going to scoop up all the divisional wins anyways. So, with Arizona, San Francisco, yeah, nothing. Yeah, that's true. Firestone, yeah. What was the name of that tire that Firestone made that had a major recall 20 years ago? They put them on the Explorers, and they used to call them the Ford Exploders. I cannot remember. I know you know what I'm talking about. And so, of course, you can't really talk about Detroit and blowing things up without mentioning the Palace going down a couple months ago. That was a real pretty building. I figured they would. The Wilderness ATATX. Yeah. And they had that Australian speaking guy. Oh, yeah. And you'll always have the Malice at the Palace. Let me see here. But yeah, just I used to work with explosives and stuff, so kind of looking at how they demolished that building was kind of neat. They just kind of left the frame hanging with the roof and just kind of knocked it out, swept the leg on it. It's kind of like watching a part of your family die in a way. Kind of like when I watched the Fulton County Stadium blow up in '97. It's like a PCU goes with it. I was in Dallas when they imploded the old Cowboy Stadium. Oh yeah, they finally brought the Silver Dome down on the second try, huh? I mean, they wasted an hour of my life when I was sitting there anticipating the implosion of the Silver Dome, and all I did was knock out a few stanchions. Okay, sorry, my headset died there for a second. I had to plug it back in. Oh yeah, the MARTA bus. It was the MARTA bus that blocked the Georgia Dome, and it was the Weather Channel that it blocked. But that's why they should stick to weather, not cross over into sports. But the Georgia Dome did a very good impression of the Atlanta Falcons, so just. But hey, we got the Braves. I don't really have high hopes for them in this series, which is a good thing, so I can't be disappointed. If they lose, then it'll be exactly how I thought it would be. And hey, if they won, pleasant surprise. I should put money on the Dodgers. That way, if the Braves win, I lose $500. But hey, then my team's in the World Series. I'd pay $500 for that, right? They 4 shutouts in 5 games. Only the 1905 Giants had done that. And I think the Cleveland Indians had 5 shutouts in the postseason, and that's basically it. But you're not going to shut out the Dodgers, honestly. It'd be a miracle if you shut them out in any of these 7 games. So it's basically going to be on the offense. Freddie Freeman's going to have to show up, and And I watched MLB Network talking about all the lefties have that the Dodgers can throw at Freeman. But it's like, do you realize that Freeman can hit lefties as good as righties? So that really doesn't make a bit of difference. Let's see. But yeah, I was gonna say a little bit ago that fun fact is that I moved to Deshaun Watson's hometown. He's got a street named after him down the street here. And I kind of feel big now because I actually had a inside, you know, had an inside scoop on the Atlanta Falcons and why they keep doing the way that they're doing now, and just how it all ties back to the culture. And I spoke in my video about the Dan Quinn firing, about an unnamed Atlanta Falcons player that I wasn't going to name, but he specifically told me that the reason that they are collapsing like they are this year is because they never got over the Super Bowl loss. And really, there's a lot of correlation from 2017 to 2020. Brian, can you guess what Atlanta Falcons player I'm talking about? I think you do know. I think I've told you. One of the greatest defensive ends in the history of the game with 136 sacks, I think. He's 13th all time. Yes, you do know. Also played for the Jets and the Cardinals, but he really wasn't that great of a Cardinal. I mean, he was already at the back end of his career, so. And that would be Mr. John Abraham. But yeah, I got a comment on my last video. When I was doing the predictions for the Astros and the A's. Well, mainly about Carlos Correa's comments. 133 and a half. That's right. But basically, the guy told me, he goes, "What did you say about the Astros losing to the A's?" He goes, "If you're looking for knowledge or insight into the game, look elsewhere. You are watching the wrong video and the wrong YouTube channel." When you kind of observe the situation, you see the matchup between Oakland and Houston. You have Oakland, who was pretty much on fire, winning the division by like 5 games. And then you have the Houston Astros, who finished under 500. I mean, who would pick the Astros over the A's in the NLDS? Not many people. So it's just kind of annoying that these, I call them hindsight warriors, come in and they're like, "Yeah, haha, told you so." I'm like, well, I didn't see y'all making any videos predicting that the A's were going to lose to the Astros. You just come in after it happens to poke fun of the people that had the guts to say it. Those people annoy me. I told him I didn't need him. He can go run away. Brian, I think we should get a video going. Get you a computer with a webcam and we can do back and forth sports talk for like 2 hours a night. I mean, you know us, you can't get us to shut up about sports. But yeah, it was interesting what you were saying earlier about LeBron. Even though it was a LeBron team with the Lakers, it was, good storyline, following the death of Kobe and the COVID thing that, of course it would be the Lakers to win. So yeah, I mean, I can't really be that mad. I mean, I'm not a LeBron hater. I'm just a realist. And, when it comes down to it, I mean, if LeBron was a better, more gracious loser in the finals, I think he'd have not had to have asked for that respect, when he won the MVP. I mean, I got nothing wrong with the guy personally. I think he's a good dude, and he's a great player. I just think that when he's on the court, he tends to have that little disrespectful side when, there's still time left on the clock and you kind of depart from your team and walk off the court. I mean, what example is that setting for the kids at home? I mean, I know Dirk did it in 2011, but he won the finals. He's kind of overcome. Yep, Kobe's best friend takes over and wins them the championship. I mean, it would be a good it'd be a good story for Hollywood, for sure. And the fact that he beat his former team at the same time. Let me see. Let me check to see if my nope. My statistics are still not in. I would like to know what caused this data outage for this statistics provider. Because I thought it was just the site this morning, and then I thought it happened this morning, and then no, FanDuel's down, Google's down, and then all of a sudden, no, it didn't happen this morning. It happened yesterday morning. So it makes you wonder if there was something sinister at play, possibly a hack. But you gotta love those FanDuel conspiracy theorists. Let's see. I'm gonna go back, see if they have any updates. So what they're saying, as of 1 a.m. Eastern time, which is about 3 hours ago, we have many stats loaded from an emergency statistics provider. We know every statistics is important to you. Well, obviously, you don't want to leave anything out. So we will keep loading them as fast as we can can build a new provider into our system. I think that's going to be an interesting story because I think the aspect of fantasy has been kind of woven into the fabric of sports to the point where it's messing with people's lives. I mean, you can only imagine, the people playing FanDuel. I don't know if DraftKings is using that same provider, but FanDuel people have so much money on the line and now they can't get their statistics, they can't win their money. And a lot of people are already talking about having a mass exodus from FanDuel, even though, it's not their fault. They're not the ones doing this. I had like 5 different people saying, well, this is just FanDuel trying to take our money. No, this is much, much bigger than FanDuel. This is their statistics provider, faltering somehow. And it wasn't like someone just turned off the internet and turned it back on. Otherwise, they would have done that. So there had to have been some kind of catastrophic event that did that. It'll be interesting to see the next couple of days, and we'll see what comes out of that. Let's see. Any other sports stories that we can cover here real quick before I get out of here? So now, Dwayne Haskins, I don't know if you've seen this, was once the starting quarterback for the Washington Football Club. Not only was he dropped to the third string behind Allen and Smith. It is now reported that he's going to be traded before next month's deadline. I think if I'm an Atlanta fan, I'm going to be looking at because Matt Ryan's in his mid-30s now. He's not going to be playing forever, and he never really achieved the status of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in terms of leading teams to the promised land. So maybe Haskins would be a good understudy for Matt Ryan, and they can use their first pick in next year's draft to get some defensive help. Maybe get one of them grain-fed boys out of Alabama. But yeah, they believe now he's just going to be a healthy scratch from here until he's traded. So he's pretty much played his last game as a Washington Redskin. You heard it here second because CBS Sports reported it first. And really nobody's awake right now anyways to kind of give you that information. But how about Alex Smith? 2 years, 17 surgeries. And if you haven't heard this, let me bring this up for you, the comparison of Alex Smith. Brian, have you heard about the similarities between Joe Theismann and Alex Smith's injuries? You've heard some. Well, I will give you the rundown of, because I remember reading this. I don't know everything, but I just remember reading it as like, but believe it or not, Alex Smith almost died from that injury. That's the craziest thing out of it all. So basically, it was the same injury. It was a broken right tibia and fibula. Theismann's injury occurred November 18th, 1985. Alex Smith's November 18th, 2018. So we're talking about 33 years apart, exact date. They both played for the Washington Redskins. They were both on their own 39-yard line. The final score of both games was 23-21. And the injury to Joe Theismann was caused by Lawrence Taylor, who was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Alex Smith's injury was caused by J.J. Watt, who, guess what, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year there. And I think that it continues. Let's see here if we can expand this. So the left tackle, I don't know what they mean by that, but isn't that crazy? So basically, same yard line, same final score, same date, just different years. Same injury, and basically, the same credentials of the person that tackled him. I don't know what the world is trying to tell us by that, but pretty neat. But it also begs the question, how similar was it with Dak's injury today compared to what Alex Smith had to deal with 2 years ago? Of course, it was the tibia fibula, so kind of like in the shin area, kind of lower leg, lower shin. But with Dak Prescott's injury, it was a compound fracture and dislocation, and compound fracture basically means the bone is sticking through the skin. So if it was that bad, you now have to figure the risk of infection because now it's an open wound. So definitely Dak is out for the year, but at the same time, you kind of have to worry about the long-term effects in terms of infection, because just like Alex Smith and his injury, I mean, you can lose a leg, and if infection, you know, kind of manifests, you can get septic and lose your life. I don't know what it is with these quarterbacks. Oh my goodness. You figure that a position like the running back or the wide receiver would suffer the most severe injuries, but when it comes to the lower extremities, it seems like the quarterbacks are taking it the worst. And that's just, yeah. Let's see here. Trying to see if we missed any sports stories. Ooh. So to kind of add on to the Dwayne Haskins story, yes, we definitely need to make plans, and I will end the video on this. So with the Dwayne Haskins expected to be traded by November 3rd, and it is now being reported that the rival executives are already scouting him out and watching the film. So what are the chances he may go to Dallas to kind of take over for Dak and maybe back up Dalton? It could be a good storyline. Um, Dallas, of course, needs to get that defense better, but I think it would be a good story that, they trade Haskins to Dallas, and Haskins starts against Washington and just makes them regret their decision to trade him. That's why we watch sports. It's not just the scoreboard, it's the storylines behind the scoreboard. That's why I've been watching for 30 years. We have gone an hour into this live stream. I have had relationships that have lasted shorter than this. That's saying something. But yeah, Brian, we will collaborate. We will definitely collaborate and see if we can get like a split video, something like that. And oh yeah, we'll talk sports all night if anybody wants to join us. Oh, by all means, we'll debate. We'll think. We'll get deeper into the topics. This is just a start, ladies and gentlemen, or just gentlemen. But yeah, that is it. So I will end this stream right here, and hopefully I will see more of everybody later. Like Dan Quinn, I'm out.